This from Brownswire.com. 3 potential training camp trade candidates from the Browns. They say Donovan Peoples-Jones, and we'll come back to him. Joshua Dobbs and Nick Harris are the 3. About Peoples-Jones, after selecting Cedric Tillman in the 3rd round, wide receiver with a similar skill set, Peoples-Jones, Browns could look to get something in return. No trade talks on a contract extension between the Browns and Peoples-Jones, so the possibility does exist. I'd be surprised if they trade Donovan Peoples-Jones, especially because we mentioned Marquise Goodwin. Nick Harris is a guy that I think they think can play. You know, he was going to be the starting center. So if somebody's willing to trade them, you know, a 6th, maybe even a 7th round draft pick, and they feel comfortable enough with what they see from Luke Whippler, I think of all of them, Nick Harris is the one that makes sense. Joshua Dobbs, they're not going to trade him unless somebody gives them something that would make him their starting quarterback.
Yeah. You know what the thing about Nick Harris is, though? Nick Harris is a guy who has some playing experience at guard out of Washington. He was the starting center, only played 1 game, blew out his knee in the first preseason game last year against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'll tell you what, Nick Harris is a guy that gives you some versatility. Say, for instance, next year, you got to move on from Teller, or excuse me, Wyatt Teller, if you have to move on from him. If you need a backup center, this is a guy that could play both guard positions. He could play the center position. That's where he started from. And you could get him on the cheap. So I look at it like this. He's a guy that could potentially make that roster. I think he's a guy that you really have to look out for because to me, he's too good of a football player to just cut outright and right. And then when you talk about trading individuals on the offensive side of the ball, the Donovan Peoples-Jones one doesn't make sense to me. Because Donovan Peoples-Jones is in his last contract year, so you got a guy that's motivated. You got a guy that knows the offense, has been in offense multiple years. He's playing with Deshaun Watson, which is going to be his best quarterback he's ever played with. And you need guys to play. We already got 3 or 4 guys that are out on injury. Not knowing when Marquise Goodwin is coming back, so it'll be foolhardy in that circumstances to get rid of a player who probably is your 2nd or 3rd best playmaker out there, behind Elijah Moore, and that gives Elijah Moore more room to work because you can use DPJ on some of the routes, some of the digs, some of the square ends that he's going to run, and you can still do some things with Elijah Moore. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't trade either one of those guys because actually I think those guys can help you this year, and that's what you need. You don't need to count on rookies when you're at this stage of your building project. You need to get veterans that know what they need to do so they can get in, get your job done, and they don't need much training in the offseason.